Alrighty, everyone, here we are. Welcome back to the School of Light for another image breakdown. On the screen is the amazing David Gilliver. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thanks. You all right?
We're at opposite ends of the day. It's kind of dark outside, and I think it's early morning in Scotland.
Yeah, whenever we talk, it always have a bit of a giggle about this. You're getting ready to go to bed, and I've just had my breakfast.
That's the one. Alrighty. So as with all of these image breakdowns, the idea behind the series is I introduce you to an artist who I, in these first ones, it's just people that I love, artists who I respect, I've known for a long time or whatever. But the idea with these first ones is I'm introducing you to light painting photographers who have been around for a long time. Now, there's a beautiful story with David and I. So we go way back to the very early days of Flickr, and as you're going to see in a minute, David and I, and we're talking 2010. So I was just looking at some of your photos on Flickr, mate, and it's ridiculous. It says 10Y.
I know.
So, yeah, 10 years ago, 10 years, mate. But David and I had a pretty special relationship on Flickr in those early days because David is an exceptionally good creator of orbs, right? And I basically only spun orbs for 5 years. I didn't know how to do or didn't choose to do anything else. And so there was a group of us on Flickr in the early days, and we would push each other so hard. But the beautiful thing about David and any of you other guys out there that used to spin, and ladies, sorry, David was always the guy I wanted to beat. because you would go outside, mate. You were out in the wild spinning, and so there's no surprise at all, man, that the image, I'll pop it up on screen temporarily now, that we're going to be looking at has an orb in it. And this is a particularly delicious photograph. So this is the photo we're going to be breaking down. But I just want to introduce David to you all. David is a guy who not only has been light painting continuously for 10 years, which is a very rare thing. People dive in and out. But I have quite a close affinity. Is that how you say? I feel, yeah, Dave and I are very similar.
It's less controversial than close relationship.
Yeah. David is, and as always, I make notes, he's a wonderful educator. Now, David has produced, and it's in its second edition now, the most wonderful book on light painting. It is super comprehensive. It stars a pretty fantastic orb spinning guy in there, I think, but it is a wonderful read. It's in its second edition. I'm going to link to that. But not only that, but Dave or David, mate, come on.
Either, yeah.
Dave is good because I've known you for a bit. So Dave also does physical workshops in Scotland, and by all accounts, they're extremely good. But we were just chatting that he's doing a whole pile of Zoom workshops, which I know are pretty tricky. So David is a bit like me and quite a few people in our community that he loves to share and educate and help spread the light. And I have a massive amount of respect for anyone that does that. So bravo, mate. Let's bring this image up on the screen. I've always loved this photograph, man. I've always loved it. And this is happening to me quite a bit through this series, as I've had the photograph on my screen now for about 5 minutes. And what happens is I'm seeing all these things that I've never seen before. And I didn't realize that behind that orb is a beautiful orange sky. Which is amazing. So without
some landscape sneaking through.
Yeah, which is beautiful. So mate, we do this in 2 stages. The first one is talk to me a little bit about, I think in this instance, the location. Was it easy to get to? Where did the idea come from? Hit us.
Okay. So the 30-second summary of going where I went that night kind of links to many of my outdoor images back at that point in time, kind of like how you started as well, Dennis, in terms of finding an escape. I was working a really, full-on job in an office at the time, and I would spend most of my evenings just escaping and getting outdoors. And I used light painting very much as that kind of mechanism through which to both express myself and escape the daily grind. It was it was a lovely, cathartic, relaxing process that I badly needed at the time. And that particular location was situated on the island of Guernsey, which is in the Channel Islands, just kind of in between England and France. And it was at the end of a really twisty little single lane track that leads down to a bay next to the sea.
Yeah.
And that little kind of arched kind of cabin area, or kind of shed thing, it's used by fishermen to store fishing gear. So it's sometimes full of crab pots or little boats. It's quite a small space, as you can tell by looking at the orbs, because the biggest orb, I think, is about 2 meters high.
Yeah.
So that gives you a good feel for the scale of the place.
Yeah.
And whenever that space was empty, if I ventured down there in the dark to kind of check it out, it just felt like a nice, safe place to be. And it was just lovely to shoot from as well, because on different nights, you'd get different amounts of ambient light coming through. And as you can tell, on that particular night, it was really dark.
Yeah.
Which is why you can't really, the orb is opaque, but you can just make out a little bit of the landscape sneaking through. And that was after about 6.5 minutes of exposure. It was still,
wow.
I mean, it was so dark. So that's where the location is situated. And that was a spot that I returned to time and time again. It was one of my favorites.
It's like I said, you look at these photographs. I've seen this image so many times, but I've never really looked at it. And it's something I really want to encourage people to do is, and I keep saying this, I sound like a broken record, but it's so important. We spend so much time on our phones, scroll. Oh, nice image. But I'm seeing so many things. You mentioned the water. I know it's phenomenally dark, but is it actually on the water's edge? Obviously, there's fishing gear there.
Yeah, it's almost.
This is where they store their fishing gear.
Yeah, this is where they store it. So it's actually slightly more terrifying than that. It's about 5 meters up. So that the very edge of the little kind of alcove area is a 5 meter drop onto concrete. So working up there was both kind of freeing and slightly scary if I got close to the edge as well.
So, look, before we get into the technical stuff, like there's some things I really love about it, and it's not just because there's an orb in there, right? I'm like a moth to those,
orb collector.
Yeah. But I love the symmetry. Obviously, I think. Like I just love symmetry in all photographs, but it's particularly in light painting. The colors are magical, but from a technical point of view, there's some things I'm keen to learn, but it draws you in because of the leading lines and all of that sort of thing. So what I would love you to do for us, mate, is you and I, although we create something that looks very similar in the orbs, we both have incredibly different techniques. So what I would love you to do for me is break down the steps that are involved in creating this image succinctly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Succinctly, I'll try my best. So I quite like, this is actually quite unusual for me, because when I trained at art school years ago, I hated giving any artworks titles. Something's changed in my brain since leaving art school. I actually quite enjoy titling my light painting work. And funnily enough, that when you said the leading lines and how it draws you in, that image is actually called Drawn to the Light. Partly because of how it makes me feel, and partly because it's got kind of moths or butterflies kind of fluttering around that, of course, get drawn to bright things. Anyway, I find that kind of enjoyable as well. But so
I think it's nice.
Taking a step back and looking at the process quickly, always interesting to talk to you about orbs in particular, because we've been spinning these things for 10 years plus and use very different techniques, which I love. And I'll talk your viewers through how this works. I know you've done many an orb tutorial, so we'll maybe we'll touch upon it really briefly maybe now. So putting a marker on the ground is always really important, because you're going to have to aim the light source at something on the ground around which you're going to walk when you're spinning the lights to create the 3-dimensional orb. So we'll get that out of the way now. But my technique really centers around. So this goes back to when we were on Flickr and kind of competing and trying to spin really lovely, accurate, full-looking orbs.
Yeah.
And man, it used to do my head in because I could never using wire devices and spinning them manually. I used to make such a mess. I found it really tricky. I know you then did the sensible thing and went off and built your own beautiful orb spinning device, which I now I'm proud to say I own.
Yeah.
Completely different technique to what I've made this work using. So like I say, I was making such a hash of making the work early on. My brain went down a completely different path to yours. I wanted to gain more control over how I spin the lights.
Yeah.
And my device relies on a more kind of mechanical approach.
Yep.
So it involves one of these.
Yep.
Which is slightly unusual compared to your technique.
Yep.
And it involves a pretty long metal pole.
Wicked. Yeah.
With lights attached to it, and it just taped on, really rudimentary.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the pole, I've got a little hex bolt that sticks out that I just drilled through the middle, right in the middle. And the pole attaches to the drill.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. That's how I get the pole spinning. And the whole theory behind creating this device 10 or so years ago was I needed something that was going to guarantee equal spacing from end to end of the lights.
Yeah.
And something that would help me regulate the spinning of it to help me create more accurate looking orbs. Like I say, I was making such a mess of it using the kind of more manual approach, which I have more respect for in a way. So that's how the process works. But with my process comes a bit of a practical problem, shall we say, because the lights are switched on by hand at the end of the pole.
Yes.
Unlike your Genius device, which can be switched on and off using your thumb with a switch.
Yeah.
I rely on other human beings when I'm out light painting to help me, because so what happens is I'll get into a bit of a spin. I'll get the rhythm of the spin going using the drill, standing over that spot on the ground. And whoever's with me assisting or just chilling out and helping me light paint, I'll ask them to begin the exposure using the remote trigger device or the cable release. They'll start the shot. And once because there's two orbs in this shot, right? So there's a bit more complexity as well. So once I have done a full 360 and I know the first orb is kind of locked in and nice and complete, I ask the friend or my wife or whoever's helping me to then cover the lens using a black piece of card, because I need the light the light in front of the camera to cut off, to allow me give me the ability to walk out of shot, change poles, which is why you see two orbs in the shot, one shorter pole and one longer pole. I then attached in pitch black the second pole to the drill, stumbled back into shot to find the spot where I'd spun the first one, and then started spinning again and said to the person, okay, uncover, and they lift the cards off the front of the camera, which allows the second orb to form into the shot. I hope that makes sense.
And I have a question and I never knew that. I just didn't know that. But looking at it now, you can see. I presumed that a pole and you had a light halfway down and one at the end, and that's how it works.
You can do that. Yeah.
But looking at it now, there's the gap between the bottom of the two orbs and the top is different. So.
Which makes it feel a bit more organic, which I think is because albeit this device and this process is quite mechanical, it's kind of a fusion between me operating and the mechanics of it using a pole and a drill. If they were completely perfect, I would find that slightly off-putting. They're really accurate because the process helps me gain accuracy, but it still gives them a slightly organic feel, which I enjoy.
Well, that's the German way. That's how the Germans do it, mate. They you can always tell a German orb. And I imagine holding the drill and spinning like it is. There is still some skill there.
Really, really firmly into my chest.
Yeah.
So that because you need obviously to operate from exactly the same height the whole time, or roughly.
You got it.
So I hold it really, really. I have to kind of tense up. It's quite full on. So I know we're going to maybe touch upon it in a little while, but we went through a bit of a competitive stage, didn't we? We were trying to produce the most orbs in a single exposure. Listen, man, you had the upper hand. I was walking around with a 2 meter long pole and a drill. It was exhausting.
Yeah, it did get pretty crazy there for a little bit. So,
Yeah.
so then you finish the second one. The person puts the card over the lens again, obviously,
Yep.
and then there's a
I
lot
then
more.
walk out of shot.
Yeah, so you walk out of the shot, and then there's these incredible butterflies. Tell me how you do that.
Yeah, and you know that's the only thing that is slightly frustrating for this talk, because that beautiful little tool that I used to create the butterflies, it died years ago. You won't see it in much of my recent work because it just doesn't exist anymore. But it was really simple in its premise. It was just a tiny little template of a butterfly that was battery operated, and when you press the button, the butterfly just flashed on and off.
Wow.
It was really that simple. And
so
all
not,
I did,
it's not a stencil as such.
no, and I know there are loads of lovely stencil tutorials online. You can make them from using a shoebox, can't you? And black tape and stuff. I could make my own template. I probably should make my own stencil actually, if I want to ever repeat that kind of process. But this was a bit more straightforward.
Yeah, it sounds nice.
I bought it online. It was called an L butterfly. I think it was produced by the same folk that make L wire.
Yeah.
And they just stopped making them. But I only had one, and it only worked for a few years, sadly, and then it fizzled out. I just walked around the space, again, completely blind. It was pitch black, and just kind of guessed the placement without any real planning. I just wanted to fill that space with butterflies that looked like they were taking flight through the space.
Now, and then maybe not the last element, but we haven't talked about this, but there's something that has leapt out at me about this photograph, and it's something that I bang on so often about when I'm doing tutorials or talking to people about the next part of it, which is illuminating the scene, right?
Yeah.
It's a bad habit to just sit behind the camera, if this is our camera here, and just light a torch up and go like that. I can see, and this is why it feels so good, is that you're clearly off to the side when you're doing your lighting. Am I right?
Partly right. It was side lit, but again, this is quite a unique, an interesting example of some of my work, because this was lit in a way that I don't normally use. Like you, I do normally walk around the space physically and light it with a powerful light source, like a decent torch or something.
Yeah.
This is maybe one of only ever 2 instances where I've used a flash gun, believe it or not, set the flash gun to half power.
Nice.
On a wide setting.
Nice.
And just walked in, kept it fairly, I think it was quite high up.
Yep.
Just to kind of bring out the brick detail in the top area. Yep. And flashed the flash gun into the space to illuminate it. Just one-off manual flash.
Yep. And it's done a beautiful job of doing that because it's
evenly lit.
It just gives it shape. Because the problem, I think what a lot of people miss is that if you just light from directly behind the camera, it just flattens everything.
Exactly.
It's
good to be mindful of that. And even when I'm using a torch to light a landscape with by hand, I'll normally stay fairly low to the ground to bring out shape and form of rocks and anything.
That's it. And wander off to the side. It's
yeah.
I don't normally bang on about camera gear. This is the first time actually in this series, and I will avoid doing it, but because it was created so long ago, I think you may choose to or not tell me what camera it was made with, but I imagine people. This is made in 2013, which is 7 years ago, right? So I'm looking at a very high resolution version of this photograph, and this could have been made today with a contemporary camera. People get so hung up on fancy pants cameras and lenses and stuff, and
I know.
Some of I was saying to someone the other day, I had I think about a 12-page feature in a big magazine recently, and we poured through images, and one of the images that they chose was taken on my old Canon 450D in 2011. And I was like, you sure? And they were like, yeah, we need that. And I got the magazine, and it looked astonishing because
probably just as good as the recent stuff.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And it was gorgeous. So mate, look, I'm
happy to share. I scribbled it all down just before we started this chat. So I'd love to say it was with the first digital camera that I owned, because that would be even cooler. Hey, it was the
Yeah.
first one. It's rubbish. It was kind of in between. So I started using a fairly similar camera to what you just mentioned, actually. My first digital camera that I kind of inherited in error, there's a bit of a story behind that. I won't bore you with that right now. It was the Canon 1000D, which was really entry level.
Yeah.
It was like 250, 300 British pounds. It was really cheap.
Yeah.
Wasn't overly high res. The noise levels were pretty horrible.
Yeah.
But some of my favorite light paintings that I made in those really early days were all captured using that really basic camera with a kit lens.
Yeah.
And it made very little difference. And I know you like to kind of to talk about that and discuss this notion of you don't need to spend thousands of pounds. It's so true. And you know, for people like us who've been light painting for 10 plus years, we know this firsthand, because we didn't have access to all these lovely expensive cameras back then. Digital was just kind of getting really established, wasn't it? So yeah, really basic camera, basic lens, basic knowledge, and some of the best work was made back then. I don't know if you find this, Dennis. Sometimes, like when I look back to my earlier stuff, I was maybe more mentally free because I was just starting to light paint.
Yeah, and
I think I was more imaginative almost, because I wasn't constrained by the path that's kind of narrowed over time in terms of how I now go light painting. It's become more almost process driven. But yeah, some of my favorite images were made in like the first year I started experimenting.
Totally. And what was happening back then, mate, is we were, you know, because there was no social media, like Flickr was our social media. It was,
that was it.
Yeah, that chat room, there was a chat room, and there was very rarely, there were a couple of, you know, Trevor Williams and I were joking about this yesterday. There were a couple of pretty serious scraps went on, but they were comical compared to the rubbish that happens today on social media. But we were pushed. I was pushed by you and the other guys.
Likewise.
And the pushing was not, I'm going to be better than you. It was like, we are on. I couldn't believe I am on the opposite side of the planet, and I have this amazing connection through light, and it pushed me to go out and spin a bit better, find a bigger landscape, do a bigger thing. But it was always with love. It was always I wanted you guys to love it, and we would talk about it and joke about it and chat about it. They were and again, I'm going to bang on about this, but it's really important that anyone that is watching this that is either starting out in light painting or thinks they've been light painting for a long time, get off Facebook and go and spend a day on Light Junkies on Flickr, and you will see the DNA of all contemporary light painting. You know, Trevor Williams, his orbs were what got me spinning orbs. He thought it was hilarious, and I'm like, dude, I knew nothing. Orbs, blading, I just don't care who you are or how good you think you are or how long you think you've been light painting. There is nothing that doesn't come from the early days of Flickr, and they were.
And listen, Dennis, I think that's really nice to actually, you know, it's important to acknowledge, and really pleasant to acknowledge those who inspired how your journey's evolved. I mean, before I started spinning orbs, I was seeing you getting started on that journey, and that made me want to start on it. There's something about photographers in the world of light painting. They love to share and chat, and it's a therapeutic and beautifully magical process. I think that's mainly why it's such an open, sharing and loving community.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but with other kind of categories and techniques of photography, photographers can be a really defensive bunch, you know, and they're really closed and they don't want to share anything in terms of knowledge or their process. No. But this is why light painting is so special. I know you agree with me on this one.
Oh, totally.
It's something that's so wonderful to share. And that's why we both teach it, because there's something so wonderful about sharing the process, and watching someone light paint for the first time is a beautiful thing.
I have never, in all the years I've been teaching and doing and that, and I'm talking thousands of people, I have never seen anyone go up to the back of their camera for the first time and go, whatever.
I know.
It's always, what? I mean, I made that, you know.
No one ever silently stands behind the camera. There's normally a shriek or a scream of excitement or something, you know.
Oh my God.
I don't know what. you don't get that with anything else. I mean, that says it all, really.
Not landscape. You don't look and go, oh, that sunset. Raw. You go,
Yeah. I'm already looking at it.
Yeah. Okay, mate. Look, we're going to wrap up. Thanks for talking us through that image. I mean, I would encourage anyone who is watching this to really, if you're watching it on YouTube, it's tricky, but this image lives over on Dave's website. But pause, look at it, and just breathe it in. It's a wondrous piece of art, mate. And I will be linking all over the place. David's website is a wonder to behold. There's not only a huge array of just gorgeous light painting, but a whole lot of educational stuff. I would encourage you, especially if you are relatively new to light painting, or even if you've been doing it for a bit, buying David's ebook on light painting is a no-brainer. But here's another thing, and this is something that totally, mate. Look, and here's another thing a lot of people don't know. You go to Dave's website and you will see some of his Small World. The series is Small World. The book is Miniature World. But
yeah,
David, you will recognize this type of photography, using miniatures and putting them into scenes and photographing it. Now, this work originated with Dave 20-something years ago. I mean, it is just gorgeous and a huge amount of fun to have a look at. So please go over and spend some time on David's website. It's a wonderful place to hang out. And mate, just from me to you, a huge thank you for just being my mate over the years, always being there.
Easy.
Inspiring me and pushing me. And always, I know this because I see it online and stuff, but thank you for being a wonderful father to your daughter. I think that it's something that is so important in this day and age, and I see the love you have for your daughter, mate, and it makes me feel very all gushy inside. So thanks for being a great dad. Thanks for being a good mate. Thank you for the energy and effort you put into the light painting community. And I've got to get my butt to Scotland. It's a little known fact that I nearly made it. I made it onto British soil and was turned around at customs, and it didn't happen. But mate, you and I will paint one day.
We will. We need to put that behind us, and the best way of doing that is getting you back here.
Woo! Thank you, David, and everyone that's watching. I hope you've enjoyed looking at this image. Go down the David Gilliver rabbit hole. You will not be disappointed. Thank you, mate.
Well, thanks for the kind words.
Peace. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this visit to the School of Light. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll be adding videos all the time. Head over to the Light Painting Tool Shop at the website. There's a huge array of tools I've made there for you to take on your light painting journey. Peace.